All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Hi, good morning, everybody. That's supposed to be Mo.
A wonderful Monday morning. Welcome to the Mark Thompson Show. I'm Mo Kelly in for Mark on this fabulous Monday. I know we always have a huge show, but we really have a huge show for you today as we kick off the week, and we have to talk about the Super Bowl, of course. We'll get to that in just a moment. At the bottom of the hour, we'll be joined by Gary Dietrich, CPS, iHeart television and radio political analyst. We'll also be joined by best-selling author, scholar, and journalist Sarah Kendzior. We have to talk about the Melania documentary. We have to talk about everything which has been going on around the country and around the world. We have to talk about Trump's dementia, how more people are discussing it. So much to get to. But let me start with the obvious. And if you're watching this right now, maybe you saw the Super Bowl. Maybe you were celebrating so much that you didn't quite feel up to making it in the office, and you wouldn't be alone. Millions and millions of people around the country did not report into work, or they called in sick because of the Super Bowl. And
Is that a thing? Super Bowl sick day? That's a thing?
It is a literal thing where businesses lose on the aggregate millions of dollars because people are calling in sick and businesses are overwhelmingly less productive. So yes, Kim, it is a thing. People will call in sick going after the Super Bowl, the day after Super Bowl, and refuse to go to work. A record 26.2 million U.S. employees are expected to miss work today. Are you one of them? Are you at home right now? You might be one of those 26.2 million. But it sets, let me set the stage for this discussion about the Super Bowl, literally and metaphorically. You had the Super Bowl between the Seattle Seahawks. And if you just think of the city of Seattle, you may think of a very far left city. And then you have the New England Patriots owner, Bob Kraft. And you say New England is Boston, but it's New England in the sense of very conservative. You have Bob Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, who's a huge Trump supporter and donated millions to the Trump inauguration. So there was the game on that level, the culture war on that level. And there was also the addition of Bad Bunny for the Super Bowl halftime show. But let's talk more about this stage. So arguably one of the world's biggest stages where more than 130 million people were tuning in. You have this game between Seattle and New England and all that subtext. And it's taking place in California, where Governor Gavin Newsom right now is the loudest voice of the Democratic Party leading into the midterms and possibly the 2028 election cycle. There's that. And the game is held in San Francisco, where the San Francisco 49ers play, in the city of Santa Clara.
Mm-hmm.
You know where I'm going with this, right? In California. So we have all of this Spanish nomenclature in addition to the subtext of the teams who are playing each other in this moment where the biggest story outside of Jeffrey Epstein is immigration enforcement. So that's all the subtext for Bad Bunny performing. You had the TP USA, Turning Point USA, alt-right halftime show, which was also going on yesterday. So there was a lot as far as what people were going to consume and digest and dissect. Let me tell you what I thought about the Bad Bunny performance. It was a masterclass in storytelling. And what I mean by that is you didn't need to know how to speak Spanish. You didn't even need to have the sound on. If you were paying attention, you would know that Bad Bunny is telling a story. And if you happen to be African-American like me, and I have a lot of Spanish in my ancestry, but I'm an African-American man. If you happen to be Irish, you would see parallels to those who came in through Ellis Island. There was so many layers to this, but let me stick to Bad Bunny. Bad Bunny went straight to the sugarcane fields. He was talking about, in large part, how Spanish-speaking people, because it wasn't just about Puerto Rico, but it was about Spanish-speaking people around the world, and also Latinos. And I'm jumping around, but this is important. The nomenclature is important. When I say Latinos, I'm talking about people from Latin countries as far as colonialism and also exploration, where they came to America and also Central and South America. And those societies evolved in a way where you had Latin people, and Latino is inclusive of also Haiti. I'll come back to that in just a second. But the point is, the show was for Latinos, not just Hispanics. When you say Hispanics, you're talking about Spanish-speaking people. When you say Latino, it's inclusive of countries like Haiti. It's inclusive of countries like Brazil, where they may speak French and also Portuguese, but they're considered Latinos. So this show was about Latinos in the North American and South American and Central American areas, the different hemispheres, and also the process of Latinos coming to this country, America. I'll get back to that as well. But Bad Bunny was telling a story and I would say, if you happen to like Marvel movies, this basically was an origin story for a superhero saga, where we talked about Hispanic and Latin people coming to the continent of America and all the obstacles which were overcome in the process. He started in the sugarcane fields, and if you are African American, you saw the obvious parallels to the cotton fields. He started in the sugarcane fields, and he talked about the different things that people of Latin descent had to overcome. He spent some time talking about Hurricane Maria in a pictorial sense. If you saw the electrical poles, and he was talking about Hurricane Maria and how Puerto Rico suffered because of government corruption, as far as the Puerto Rican government corruption, and also the larger American government dismissal of Puerto Rico, and how those issues Puerto Rican people were able to overcome. He was talking about the generational desires of Puerto Rican people of making sure the next generation was better off than the last generation. That's why he started in the sugarcane fields. And then he showed his generation. And then he showed the next generation, passing off his Grammy against the backdrop of his Grammy speech, and passing that Grammy to a 4 or 5 year old boy who was not Leon Ramos. That was, a lot of people have mistaken that, but he was showing the generational struggle and how it is progressing. It was very layered, it was very smart, and it was very pointed. If you know anything about Dr. King, one of his great quotes was basically saying, only light can drive out the darkness. The most powerful force is love, not hate. And if you know that, then when you saw the big Super Bowl marquee sign talking about the only thing stronger than hate is love, you know that this is an all-inclusive Super Bowl halftime show, which is not only talking about the issues going on in America right now, but talking about the overall evolution of this country as a whole, and the importance and consequence of immigrant contributions every step of the way. It was a history lesson, it was a musical lesson, and basically it was a sermon. If you happen to be a Christian, they had the wedding there. They were calling all this imagery into play, so you understood that Latino/Hispanic history is American history. And you may not have been Latino, but you should have been able to see yourself in the story that Bad Bunny was telling. It was fantastic. If you haven't seen it, I say you should go see it. If you've seen it once, you need to see it 2 and 3 times. And beyond that, he never said F ICE. He never said anything really overtly political. The only thing he said was, and I'm paraphrasing, is that we are strong together and unity is going to bring us through. not just Hispanic America, not just Latin America, but America. And he also dropped some gems at the end where he said, God bless America. Now, if you are a person who's educated in the United States, sometimes you wrongly conceive of America as just one country. But if you're educated outside the United States, you're taught that America is inclusive of all the countries in North America and South America. It's not one singular country. Hence the roll call at the end of all the different countries which are connected to Latin America, that are Latino descent, inclusive of Central America and South America. There were so many layers and so many connection points to the story. I don't know if people got it originally, but it's not too late for you to go back and get it. And for those who are of the opinion that this show is about American patriotism and love of America, it was that. If you knew the historical references, if you understood the struggle of Latin people in America and how that is very similar to African Americans, how that's very similar to even European Americans who came through Ellis Island. There were so many things where he was saying, like, our struggle is your struggle. And we struggle together. And because we remain together, we are powerful together. He didn't have to say F ICE. He basically said, I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud to be a part of this American democratic experiment, small d. And the only way that we will be able to get beyond this moment is together. Thought it was fabulous. Kim, your thoughts?
It made me want to dance. I love the history as well. I love how, I mean, I wasn't thinking of it that deeply when I watched it, although I was moved by the roll call of countries. I thought that was pretty cool. And all of the celebrity cameos, I thought it was a good performance. And I think it shows that you might not listen to that flavor of music, but that it has a wider appeal than people thought. I was listening to what you were talking about, Martin Luther King Jr.'s, the only thing stronger than hate is love. And I noted that Bad Bunny also ended his Grammy acceptance speech with those same words.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems to be then a wider message for him, something that he wants to bring to America. And I love that wider America, as you say. And I love that he got a chance to have a huge platform to show that at the Super Bowl.
Let's talk about the business for a second, because there are some, and I'm answering some of the criticisms of the choice of Bad Bunny. It's like, well, why didn't they choose someone who was American, air quotes? Why didn't they choose someone who was less divisive, air quotes? And people sometimes forget that the NFL is a business first and foremost. The NFL has 9 games scheduled in foreign countries across 5 different continents next season before the year 2026 is over. The NFL is about growing the game. And the NFL knows that the only way they can grow the game is to grow it internationally. The number one sport in the world is football, as in soccer. Latino and Hispanic support of football has made it the number one sport in the world. The only way that the NFL can start to make gains or gain ground on football with the coming World Cup is to speak directly to those audience members around the world. And that's what the NFL did. People lose sight of the fact that the NFL is a business. It is not about catering to a very small a slice of American political life in flyover country. If you think that they made a political decision because of what's going on here in America right now, you've missed the point. Most of the owners are Republicans. Most of the NFL owners are MAGA, but they love money more than anything. Don't think that Bad Bunny performed without some sort of agreement, some sort of complicity in that, and approval. It doesn't happen. Yes, Jay-Z is ahead. It is ahead of all the talent for the Super Bowl, but there are limits to what Jay-Z can do. If Jay-Z is doing something which is completely counter to the interests of the owners of the NFL, I promise you, Bad Bunny or even Kendrick Lamar last year would not have happened. This was a business decision, and it's going to yield billions of dollars in revenue for the NFL. And Randy asked, what the F did Bad Bunny do that was divisive? I don't know. I wish I had an answer for you. Sometimes the presence of someone who is not white is considered divisive. Remember, they said the same thing about Barack Obama as being the most divisive president of all time. For what? For wearing a tan suit? For liking Grey Poupon? I don't know, but sometimes people see others as some sort of an affront to their sensibilities, and they find that a priori divisive. There was nothing that Bad Bunny did in that halftime show which was quote unquote divisive. And they said, well, he sang only in Spanish. Well, have you never gone to an opera before? Have you never sat through a performance and they performed only in Italian? Or maybe listen to the Brandenburg Concerti and it's only in, or, listen to Mahler and it's only in German. This is not new. The criticisms are new and convenient because they want to demonize Bad Bunny. It was not necessary, but unfortunately, people see politics in everything. But let me talk about Turning Point USA and their halftime show. And I find it very hypocritical and ironic that the chief criticism of Bad Bunny was, well, you're making it political. Then why in the hell would you have an alternative halftime show built upon culture wars, built upon specifically trying to brand it as a patriotic American event when you're trying to sow division, when there's already an American performer in Bad Bunny? You want to brand your performance, this alternative performance, as somehow the all-American halftime show. And I don't think people actually remember this or know this, but many of the Super Bowl halftime performers previously were not Americans. You could talk about The Who, not Americans. You talk about Rihanna. You could talk about The Weeknd. You could talk about Paul McCartney. I can run the list of these U2, not Americans who performed the Super Bowl halftime show, but it wasn't an issue. But when you have an American, a legitimate American, such as Bad Bunny is, then all of a sudden it's not an American halftime show because he was speaking Spanish. And it's not my fault that the collective you, not you who's watching right now, you get it, but it's not my fault that you can't understand any Spanish. It's not my fault. If you're still in America and you can't understand any Spanish, then you're on the late freight. Maybe you don't travel. Maybe you think the world begins and ends between California and Maine. It really doesn't. You need to get out and see the world. Go to a country in which you don't speak the language and see how difficult that is. If you couldn't tolerate 15 minutes, and the show wasn't even 15 minutes, only like 8 minutes long, but the 15 minutes duration of the halftime, if you couldn't handle 15 minutes of Spanish, then why in the hell do we keep hearing about you, the same person, the exact same person who will go to Taco Tuesdays at El Torito? You'll stumble out of a bar on Cinco de Mayo and you spend hours there. You'll even order tamales for Christmas, but you can't stand the thought of 8 minutes of Spanish music. And it wasn't even all 8 minutes. And if you saw the halftime show, Lady Gaga's appearance was great.
Yeah, it was.
Her hits, but with a little salsa remix to it, it was fantastic. But people were bent out of shape of the other 7.5 minutes of Spanish. I don't get it. Actually, I do, but I don't understand the cognitive dissonance where you'll celebrate other portions of Hispanic and Latino culture in your everyday life, in your everyday comings and goings. But when you have Bad Bunny, arguably the hottest star in the world, the #1 streaming artist in the world. You don't understand why that would be appealing to the NFL? Go look at Spotify's top 10 lists right now. Right now, the top 6 slots are Bad Bunny. If he was already the #1 streaming artist in the world, what do you think today is going to be? It was a great show. So if you haven't seen it, go see it. In fact, it was better than any of the commercials. Kim, I don't know about you, but the commercials for the Super Bowl yesterday were horrible. Horrible. They had, and if you don't know, the NFL was charging $8 million for each 30-second spot.
I thought it was 10. 8? Shit.
Okay, well, you know what? 8, 10, 12, whatever. They were not getting corporate America's best. They weren't sending their best. You had the second and third tier advertisers.
Yeah, usually if you're going to spend that much money, you take some time to get really creative with it because you want your message to stick with people, right? I didn't find that so much this time. I kept watching for this commercial and I didn't see it, but there was supposed to be a commercial about Pam Bondi. And what is it? This Pam Bondi's commercial. It was supposed to be some kind of message about ICE and immigration, and so I was kept watching for it, and I didn't see it.
I didn't see it, and let me just be honest. After the halftime show and how poor the commercials were leading up to the halftime show, I was kind of tuning out and not really taking the commercial breaks as seriously, because the usual suspects, the ones who usually come with the strong ads, were nowhere to be found. I didn't see like the Doritos or the Dunkin' Donuts offering the quality type spots. And there's something else to be considered. We now have a robust YouTube culture. And if you didn't know, you could find all the Super Bowl commercials in advance of the Super Bowl. They usually post them on YouTube. There was expectation that Marvel was going to drop 1 or 2 trailers, one for Avengers Doomsday or the Spider-Man Brand New Day movies. They were neither. And I attribute this to the fact that, going back to that robust YouTube culture, that Marvel and many other movie studios know that they can drop a trailer online and it will grow organically, as opposed to spending some $32 million for like a 2-minute spot during the Super Bowl and spending that money unnecessarily. There are other ways to promote virality online without spending so much money for that one particular spot. And I get the sense that other advertisers agree, because they weren't spending the money, not because they couldn't afford it. They didn't think it was the same ROI as in previous years. It used to be where the Super Bowl would turn down. They had the pick of the litter, in the sense that just because you had the money doesn't mean that you're going to get a spot in the Super Bowl. They were very, very judicious as far as which advertisers were allowed to have their spots aired. And now it just seemed like, okay, we're just going to go ahead and take your money, because the usual participants are not coming in with ads. I saw an ad for like a local law company. It's like, okay, that had to have been a local ad. They didn't have a national ad to run in its place. There were some funny ads, but not funny in the way that we would customarily think of the Super Bowl. Like, I thought the State Farm commercial with John Bon Jovi, I enjoyed that, but it wasn't a great commercial. It was like, oh yeah, that was funny. I like the Xfinity commercial talking about Jurassic Park. If they had great Wi-Fi back in 1993, Jurassic Park, the movie, would not have happened the way it was. I thought that was pretty funny, but it wasn't a great Super Bowl commercial that we are accustomed to seeing. And here is the ad that you were talking about, Kim.
I didn't see it. Did you see this? Because I was watching for this and I didn't see it.
I think I saw part of it because I saw some of the survivors speaking out. And that was something that there was tonality was very different about these Super Bowl ads. You had a PSA with Mike Tyson talking about not eating processed food. You know, there were more seeming campaigns issue related, as opposed to traditional advertising and commercial marketing related. And maybe that just was my take on it. And
I'll say the scariest ad for me still, scary pure horror, was the Ring camera one.
Yes.
Because that was like, wait, my camera does what?
You know, that goes back to the tonality where you had a lot more serious ads, not going for humor, but more like enlightenment. And I wouldn't say just scare, but just inform.
No, scary as in, oh, we just help it find dogs. It's like, wait, this camera's watching and doing facial recognition. Wait.
And sharing with other authorities.
And sharing everything. No.
And you know what? If you were sober during that, you know, it probably hit you harder than if you had been drinking during that. I was completely sober, so I'm looking at it with more of an analytical mind. My Rams weren't in the Super Bowl, so I was not looking at the game in the same way. I was more a casual observer, an analyst, as opposed to a fan and participant in the festivities. I watched the game largely by myself. I didn't have any real fan rooting interest.
I was working.
Yeah.
This was on.
Now, since the Super Bowl was up your way,
Mhm.
did you notice anything different in the run up to it as far as how people locally were reacting?
I noticed that our local news was coated with stories about Super Bowl preparation concerts and Super Bowl preparation parties and all the events that were happening around the Bay Area for people that were coming here. And I noticed something else. There was a lot of positive comments about the city of San Francisco. Even though the Super Bowl was in Santa Clara, there's a lot of events going on around San Francisco because traditionally this is, San Francisco is kind of the big city, even though San Jose, I think, has a larger population. This is kind of the big city. And there's so much to see here. We have such a wide area. And so instead of the comments that you would expect from people, oh, it's dirty and there's homeless people and there's crime and there's this and there's that, what I heard from at least the people who were on television was, wow, we didn't realize San Francisco was such a cool city. So I think it became kind of a postcard for San Francisco and a feather in our cap because it gave us a moment to shine.
I saw one of those moments in which you're referring to. ESPN personality Pat McAfee has a very, very popular podcast and show on ESPN, but he is, I would say, far to the right on the political spectrum. And he, on this podcast and show, has been very critical of San Francisco in a political sense, talking about homelessness, talking about crime, talking about the culture wars and all that. And then when he was on an ESPN broadcast in San Francisco in Santa Clara and talked about his time touring San Francisco, he had to publicly admit how beautiful a city it was and how many of the published and public reports of the city of San Francisco had been exaggerated or not indicative of his experience while in San Francisco. And I thought that was very telling, if only because Pat McAfee is someone, you know exactly where he stands politically, but he still felt compelled to tell the truth about the status of the city. Would have been very easy to not acknowledge his previous remarks at all.
Right. Yeah. And so, from all the parties and the concerts and the way San Francisco showed up for this whole thing, I think it was good that we had it here. And, before that, I was kind of indifferent about it. So
I know that it's coming to LA, I think in 2028, if I'm not mistaken. They recently announced that SoFi Stadium will host it for the second time in the next 1 or 2 years. And that says to me, we'll be back in this situation again because LA, California, election cycle, the perception of a liberal city, and what the choice of the Super Bowl halftime performer will be and what message that may send to large of America and also international at that point, because the NFL will be even bigger at that point. And remember, the Raiders are playing in Mexico City this next season. I say that to say, don't be surprised if there is another artist who may not be perceived as American patriotic, Land of the free, home of the brave, who may be performing halftime show. That's all I'm saying. I can't predict what the next performer is going to be or who the next performer is going to be, but I can. Thank you, Tony. So in next year, it's going to be, it's SoFi in 2027. And 2028 in Atlanta, Georgia, the same Georgia that the president has been on one as far as quote unquote rigged elections. He name checked the city of Atlanta, of the 15 places he says the Republican Party should nationalize the elections, which is counterintuitive because if you're trying to nationalize the elections, you wouldn't do it by party, but that's a whole different discussion. And maybe when Gary Dietrich joins us in just a moment, I can ask him about that. But the Super Bowl, the subtext of the Super Bowl was very political. The content of the game was not political, but how we viewed it and how we perceived it, from the teams which were playing to the ownership, to the halftime show, to the alternative halftime show. And I did not see it. I got to be honest. I did not see it. I heard it was a cluster truck. I heard it was what you would expect. You had just people performing. And I'm quite sure if you're a fan of Kid Rock, you loved it. If you're MAGA, you loved it. I'm just saying it wasn't what I wanted to spend my time watching. That's all. You know, and I've been familiar with Kid Rock for decades, long before he became a political lightning rod. Once upon a time, he used to be this kid from Detroit who was trying to rap, and he was known in urban circles. He was in an urban movie called Biker Boys, you know, opposite Lawrence Fishburne. He is a long way from his musical roots. He has turned himself into a caricature, an altogether different individual in the age of Donald Trump than what he once was. I find that very fascinating, how he's reinvented himself in a way which is completely different from his musical and quote unquote political roots. Detroit is not the same Detroit as it was 40 years ago. My mother's family's from Detroit, so I saw Detroit during its heyday and during its initial struggles with the influx of Japanese car makers, and how the big three left the city of Detroit, and how economically the city was in shambles in a period of darkness for the next 20 to 30 years. The issues with Kwame Kilpatrick as mayor, saw all of that. Kid Rock is from that Detroit. And to now reinvent himself as some sort of country right-wing music star is funny to me, because it's like, oh, you obviously don't know who Kid Rock is. This is the latest grift for him. This is, you know, he's moving with a tide that he'll take him to the next point.
Isn't it interesting that we're so divided that even our entertainment has to be divided? We can't even watch the same performer, and how over time we have had many performers in the Super Bowl who were actually from different countries and not American, right? Here's a list. Phil Collins in 2000, he's from the UK. Enrique Iglesias, Spain. U2 from Ireland. Shania Twain, who's Canadian.
Forgot about her.
From the UK. Celine Dion, Canadian. Paul McCartney from the UK, but I guess they are white enough that it's okay. The Rolling Stones from the UK. The Who from the UK, Coldplay from the UK, Shakira from Colombia, The Weeknd from Canada, Rihanna from Barbados. And all of that was okay. But now, because we're so divided, and because there's this contingent of people, you know, who have it out for folks of Latino descent, now all of a sudden we have to have an alternative halftime show because it's so offensive to watch someone speak Spanish. It's sad.
It's sad, but I think it begs the question as far as what is it we want in today's America? And I know that I have a perfect person to help us answer that question.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Let's bring in CBS iHeart television and radio political analyst Gary Dietrich, who can help us hopefully fill in some of these gaps. Gary, how are you today on this post-Super Bowl Monday?
Well, I'm doing okay, Mo. It's nice to meet you for the first time here online.
It is nice to meet you as well. We were spending the better part of the last half hour talking about the subtext of the Super Bowl as far as Seattle, quote unquote, on the left. You have Boston / New England, quote unquote, on the right. You had Robert Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots, a huge Trump supporter. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, people brought that to the perception of the Super Bowl as some sort of political statement. And then you add in Bad Bunny and his mostly Spanish performance, and people just viewed it through this political lens. What does that say about America right about now?
Well, I think, Mo, it says the obvious, and that is you can't keep politics out of anything. I mean, I'm waiting for us to have, blue and red Twinkies now. It's going to be, I mean, you can't keep it out of anything. By the way, a little caveat to Boston having New England heading back there from our reunion at the esteemed Kennedy School at Harvard here in a few months. Boston's a pretty blue town. There are some conservative elements to New England, but the greater Boston region, kind of blue. But I think the thing about it struck me, Mo, a couple things about the halftime show struck me. One, when in the past, I thought, could we even technologically have a quote unquote alternative halftime show? 10, 15 years ago, there was no YouTube that everybody was accessing. So you either watched what was on the main broadcast channel or you went away and, cooked some more hamburgers. So it's interesting to me now, Mo, about where are we headed? Is there always going to be a plan B? And this could be on the right or the left, by the way. Is there always going to be now a new alternative? And so we're not having what people often describe in the Super Bowl was the biggest shared experience of the year. So there's so many storylines to this.
Did you know, and I'm asking because a lot of people don't know, the first counter programming show during the halftime was the variety skit show In Living Color, where they started all of this as providing just sort of something else, because the halftime show for the Super Bowl up until, let's say, before year 2000 wasn't that big a deal. We're talking about high school and college marching bands, and then it grew exponentially over the past 20 years or so. But to your point, Gary, it makes you ask the question, like, in the way that we have the State of the Union, we have the rebuttal to the State of the Union. Now we have to have the halftime show and the rebuttal to the halftime show. And yes, we are not more, we've never been more politically divided. And let's be truthful, politics has always had a presence in sports, be it Muhammad Ali, be it Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jim Brown, Bobby Riggs, Billie Jean King. We can run the list. So that not necessarily is new, but and I made this point that the NFL was trying to grow its brand globally more than anything, having a performer like Bad Bunny. Do you think that is understood by most Americans?
Yeah, I don't think the marketing business side of it has been talked about probably nearly enough, Mo, because I do think you're spot on. I mean, look at the first game of the year between my beloved 49ers and the Los Angeles Rams. Where's that going to be held? It's going to be down in Australia, and they're going to have then, and that's a quote unquote Rams home game. And then the Niners are scheduled to play at the end of the season in Mexico City. There's going to be another one in Rio. I think there's, I might not have the number right, but I think there's like 7, 8, 9 international games scheduled this year. And the thing about it is, people do not yet get the NFL in their own mind has now transcended the United States of America. There are no permanent teams in these other countries, but make no mistake about it, that is the goal. So I think you're spot on. This, to me, was the biggest evidence yet that that's the case.
Okay, since we know that politics and sports are almost inseparable, and many people view politics as a sport where you root for a red team, you root for a blue team. We know that this is the year, the midterms, it's an election cycle year. We know that President Trump has said that he wants to nationalize the midterms, but he mentions the Republicans need to do it. What do you make of this discussion? I know constitutionally you can't do it, but what do you make of the discussion of trying to nationalize the midterms?
Well, initially that was part of Trump's complaint here again recently about the 2020 elections, right? I mean, it always goes, seems to always some way find its way back to the 2020 election, okay? But you had GOP senators come out, as you know, immediately, Mo, and said, okay, there's not going to be any nationalizing of elections. To your point, Mo, constitutionally, they're run by the states, you know? So Trump was saying, well, you know, but in the blue states, we need to take them over. Well, that's not going to happen. You know, then it was walked back by some others administration and said, well, it's really about this voter ID deal. And by the way, this is an interesting parallel to that. In California, there is a ballot measure petitions circulating to put voter ID on the ballot, and those signatures looks like are almost complete. So you're going to have that on the California ballot. It's been talked about in Congress. Whether they can get it through or not, I don't know. But the bottom line is this. These midterms, the Trump administration has now become very serious about the fact this is for all the marbles. I say this here on Mark's show regularly. Mo, I'm sure you're aware of this. I mean, in 9 months, this is either going to be an extension, a de facto extension of the Trump administration, or they're going to have their wings seriously clipped politically and policy-wise.
It seems, and I'm just one person, I don't have any data to support this, but I have some history to support this. It seems that history would be working against the Trump administration in the sense that the party which controls the Oval Office usually loses seats in the House at the minimum in a midterm election. And if you look at not necessarily the polling, but the mood of the country, the Trump administration has made some deeply unpopular policy decisions and moves, not only inclusive of ICE, but also economically. If were a Republican, is there anything that I can point to which suggests that there isn't going to be a political bloodbath come November?
Yeah, those are both good points, Mo. First off, on the historical situation, I mean, there's only been like 2 or 3 times in the last half century where there hasn't been substantial pickup in House and or Senate seats by the party out of power in the White House. So that's the history of it. That's very true. The current environment, political environment, now that could change a lot between now and November, but that is clearly a big deal going to the midterms. We'll know a lot more, say, by this summer about whether that looks like those trend lines in terms of people not feeling as good about the economy as they did, in terms of having questions, even the people that supported Trump's work on the border and the immigration crackdown, whether the means and the tactics being used by ICE, you know, now polls show not popular in a majority sense. But if you're a Republican, because that was the specificity of your question, here's what you're encouraged about. And that is when you drill down, there's been some really good analyses just recently, like in the last week or 10 days, looking at the actual House districts that are competitive. And the House is where most of the action is going to be. Some say the Democrats could take control of the Senate, but more likely the House. So if you look at those districts that are quote unquote competitive, interestingly, and this is historically a low number, only 3 of those were won by Kamala Harris. So that's where Republicans say, hey, look, okay, the mood of the country isn't that great, but look, we're not swimming that big upstream. And by the way, the competitive districts that Democrats are looking at, many more of those were won by Trump. Now, will that hold in the midterms? We'll see. But that's the main thing right now Republicans might be buoyed by.
If you're advising the Democrats, not saying you would, but if you were advising the Democrats, would you want to see more of Donald Trump on the campaign trail right about now? In other words, is Donald Trump more of a help or a hindrance for Republican candidates?
Yeah. First off, I can't advise the Democrats being a nonpartisan political analyst. So let's get that out of the way right now. I don't think the CBS and iHeart people will be real keen on that. But here's the thing. The answer to your question in one word, 4 letters, both. Donald Trump is both. He's a help and a hindrance. How is that? He's a hindrance to Republicans and a boost to Democrats because of the things you're alluding to, Mo. That is his positive numbers, especially among key demographic groups, are not as strong as they were even a year ago. So that's number one. But in terms of the help, midterms are notoriously about the base. I mean, they're low turnout, relatively speaking. Do I think this midterm, you're going to see a much more energized electorate, even on both sides than you typically do in a midterm, but especially on the Democratic side. But the thing about it is, you've got to get the base out. That has been the Trumpian strength, as you know, for over a decade. Can he do it again? That's why the White House, by the way, is already talking about, and he's already been to Iowa, he's going to go to other places, about basically they're going to nationalize the campaign, not the election process. What do I mean by that? They're planning on putting him out on campaign style swings, from now till election day, where he's in base states and ginning up the base. That probably is the one thing that could really most help the Republicans nationwide.
How would you assess the impact and import of the Epstein files right about now? We've had millions and millions of documents in various tranches released, and we've had mixed reception to it. We know more than before. We don't know everything, but I don't know if it's made the type of impact politically that the Democrats would want it. And I know it hasn't made the impact culturally that the survivors have wanted.
Right. Nor, by the way, has it had the kind of impact that even many MAGA folks, as you know, have called for, who've called for the full release. This has been one of the really politically remarkable things about this issue, the Epstein files, is you got both ends of the spectrum saying release the whole thing, right? And then, of course, the redactions, you know, by definition are supposed to protect the survivors, the victims, although a lot of people question that. I think that reason why it hasn't had as big an impact immediately, Mo, is because it's been the drip, 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 right? Some comes out, then there's a long period, then some more comes out. Then it's now. I think there's two big things that are maybe going to accelerate that impact. That is starting today, members having the ability to go into this, you know, sequestered area and look at the redacted files. Okay, now. They're not supposed to be talking about those. That's supposed to be kept in secret. You know how well that's likely to go. So
Right.
I think, you know, in Washington, you can't even keep your dog's favorite food secret, let alone anything else. So I think you're going to hear some things out of that people are probably going to be maybe eyebrow raised about. And then the second piece is going to come in about 3 weeks when Bill and Hillary Clinton go before, now they said they're going to do it, go before the House committee chaired by Comer. And they're going to be heavy on Epstein questions, maybe not exclusively, but that too. Is anything going to come out of that would, you know, get people more energized? So I don't think this is going away, the Epstein issue. The question is, what is the impact going to be in coming months and especially in November?
I know that people, and this is not necessarily impact, but this is concern. I know people like Elon Musk, given the revelation of his emails and correspondence, has been more than a bit concerned about the perception of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. I know Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, he's been under fire, if you will, as far as calls for his resignation, given his visitation with his family to Epstein Island and so forth. Do you think there might be any casualties on a cabinet level or a Trump administration level that we should at least look out for?
Yeah, well, unless there's sort of more concrete evidence that people point to, you know, and maybe civil litigation or something launched along those lines. Right now, the Trump team seems like steady as it goes, right? Just kind of weather the storm. By the way, this is happening in so many different corners too, Mo. You're probably aware of the fact the head of the LA Olympics Committee is supposedly part of those files.
Casey Wasserman.
There's been calls for him to step down. I mean, I think this is going to be very wide ranging. There have already been some people that have stepped aside from official positions, as you know, but within the business community, the political community, the entertainment community. I mean, I don't know where this all ends, but I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. And who knows who the eventual casualties, at least from a public perception, are going to be.
Let me stay right there. And it's not necessarily Epstein files related, but it's perception of MAGA related. We know that the Washington Post, Jeff Bezos, they laid off some 300 employees. My word, gutted one of the preeminent news organizations in America. How do you think that is being perceived and received in this moment?
Well, you know, it's a twofold story. And in the second part of the story rarely is talked about. And that is, you know, it surfaces every once in a while, but that's the raw economics, as you know, Mo, of the print media in particular. You know, I mean, it has been print media across the country. Some of them, even now, large city newspapers are beginning to completely close their doors. So that's the economic reality of it. So like, for example, here's the deal. If they had just cut off, say, the sports department, which apparently they did in whole and not in part, you know, people go, oh, well, okay, that's the economic portion of it. But when it comes to the other side, the news reporting side of it, that's when all the theories come out, you know, well, this is to favor so-and-so, or it's because of Bezos, or it's because people are afraid of Trump, or whatever the storyline is, you know, is there some other more nefarious purpose to these cutbacks? That is going to be debated ad infinitum, as you know, in the broadcast media, in the print media, in the online media. This has become the modern storyline. How much are these quote unquote big changes being influenced because of politics, and how much of it is just the sheer eyeball factor of economics?
Well, you mentioned broadcast, and so let me go there. We know that the FCC has had an outsized role in this administration as far as policing broadcast outlets. We know that the FCC has opened a probe into ABC's The View over so-called equal time, and I know it's not equal time, but that's how it's being cast. It's equal time as far as its criticism of Republican administration officials and candidates as opposed to Democratic ones. Where do you come out as far as the specific role of the FCC, and also its role in adding to those conspiracy theories that politics are playing a role?
Yeah, well, this is really interesting what's happening right now, because it's probably been long overdue, but there needs to be an updated definition of the so-called equal time rule. That used to be talked about a lot in the past, but essentially what it was because the FCC was granting publicly sanctioned licenses. You couldn't just, as a media outlet, utilize what they considered to be a public benefit, because of course that license is used then in a for-profit business. You couldn't use that to benefit one political party over another. That was the initial and rationale behind the equal time rule. But now the question is becoming, so how far does that extend, right? I mean, is that so many of these outlets now not only say, even if they're on broadcast, they have a significant online presence, right? So does it extend there, or no, that's not part of the FCC's bailiwick? So this is where part of, just historically speaking, we're running into a brick wall. Is the media has changed so dramatically since some of these initial regulations were promulgated. How are they? Should they be thrown out completely? You know, is it a free for all, or do they have to change? So that's part of it, is the rulemaking, and then the other part of it is just the consolidation of media, and the ability for a Bezos or somebody to buy a major media outlet has raised these questions as well.
You mentioned this, and I think it's our duty to help people understand when we talk about the FCC and broadcast, that has to do with the use of the public airways like ABC, CBS, NBC. It does not include cable outlets, which is a private signal. So people say, well, if you're going to do this to ABC, why don't you do it to Fox? Well, Fox is not under the umbrella of the FCC, which goes to your point, Gary. It has to do with understanding the new role of media, whether there should be an update of Section 230 and the internet, all these things, because people now, they're getting their news from all these places having nothing to do with broadcast television. I don't know what the landscape is going to look like in 10 years, but that leads me into my next question. Do you think that broadcast, and I'm going to ask you to put on your soothsayer and oracle hat, do you think broadcast will have an increasing or diminishing role in our public discourse as we move further into the future?
Yeah, well, here's a funny thing. Sometimes we still rarely refer to them as the airwaves. Almost nobody gets their signal through the airwaves anymore, right? There's not antennas on people's houses like there was when I was a kid, right? Those even come through cable systems. I think the question I would boil down in this way, Mo. In the past, you had maybe a half a dozen major broadcast outlets, right? And so you had a shared discourse, and they had, some would have said in those days, an outsized influence because of that, right? Because you had so much of people's, any information they got would have been through A, their hometown newspaper, and B, just 3 or 4, maybe 5, 6 at most different broadcast channels. Now with the plethora, not only of cable outlets, as you point out, but online outfits. And then how about the rise of the podcast, which really only raised its impact and showed itself the power of it in this last election cycle. Joe Rogan and others being the most notable of those. So I think you're going to have the continued dissemination and dilution of major media outlets. What doesn't matter whether they're the Post, whether they're a broadcast network, whatever, and you're going to have an increasing, like we have in so many things, Mo, and increasing self-selection by people of those they want to listen to and those they trust. And those will be multiplying right now as they continue to be exponentially.
Gary Dietrich, CBS, iHeart Television and Radio political analyst. And Gary's segment is sponsored by Bill Campbell at Remax Gold. If you're relocating in to or from Northern California, you need a highly respected real estate professional like Bill Campbell of Remax Gold. Call or text Bill at 530-448-7474. Again, that's 530-448-7474.
The Mark Thompson Show.
And Kim, this is why I love sitting in for Mark, because I get to have these real substantive conversations about a variety of topics. I think that's why it separates the Mark Thompson Show from, I'll say, all that other noise out there on YouTube and beyond, because we get to have real discussions. It's not just about telling folks what they want to hear, but what they need to know. And that's supremely different.
I agree. It was a great conversation with Gary Dietrich, and I love that Sarah Kendzior is waiting in the wings, and it's going to be a great conversation when you talk about the Epstein files, what's going on in the UK, and why it seems that they're more accountable in that country than we are here in the United States, as far as holding people responsible for things, and having folks resign over this. I know there's calls today for Howard Lutnick to resign. It'll be interesting to hear her perspective on all of that.
And before we get to Sarah, just want to let you know, you can still order Sweet 106 bakery gifts for your Valentine through their digital gift cards. And digital gift cards are always available, so nobody misses out on Valentine's Day gifts. And I just want to clarify with the shipping. A lot of the Mark Thompson Show buyers, you may think that they're overnighted the day that the order is received. Just want to let you know that after you place your order, orders are not delivered the next day, but because all of their products are made fresh to order, prepared in the order received. So just know that the processing takes typically 4 to 7 days. And once the order is ready to ship, the buyer will receive a shipping confirmation email. And then delivery takes 24 to 48 hours after shipment, depending on location. So I know you want them immediately.
Yes, you do. I think Tony got his as well. God, they're so, just saying they're so good. Like, they're gone at Tony's house. They're gone at my house as well. They're so good. I wanted to show you that I spotted this on the Mark Thompson Show Facebook fan discussion page. This is from El Guevara, who posted on the page that he got his Dubai chocolate cupcake cake. He called it the shiznit. A lot of people you could see on the other section there, a lot of people are posting the products that they've received in the mail. So many positive reviews. These cupcake cakes are absolutely divine. So good. The brownies, I haven't had the brownies, but I'm told by people who have ordered them, they're huge. Like, when you think brownie, no, brownie, big brownie. And the cupcakes. And as you mentioned, if you miss the window for ordering treats for your loved one for Valentine's Day, you can always get the digital gift card, because they have gift cards on the website as well. So it's sweet106bakery.com. And the good news for everyone is that there is a Mark Thompson Show discount as well. Here it is. It is Mark T, and you get 15% off. Yeah, it looks like a regular brownie. Apparently, it's the size of a dinner plate. It's huge, from what I understand. And Mark and Courtney love the blondies. That they have, the kind of the mixed flavors. They have peanut brownies, they have blondie brownies, they have cookies, they even have cake mixes on the website. So anyway, check it out, sweet106bakery.com. Use the code MarkT for 15% off. Yay.
It sounds so yummy.
It's really yummy.
Tony, why didn't you send me some before you ate it all? I thought you were
I meant to. How about that? I really was, but I had to make sure it was. I had to make sure it was okay first.
Okay,
and then there was none left.
And it's okay.
Look, I budgeted. I cut it into slices. I'm like, I'm just gonna have this much a day. Everything's cool.
You can't ration good stuff like that.
No.
Good. I'll sit
Try
down
though
and
you
just
might.
eat a
That
whole
strawberry-
box.
The strawberry that they sent me. Oh my God, that strawberry is so damn good. So damn good.
Before we get to Sarah Kendzior, very quickly, Kim, let's talk about some of the donors who have been so nice to help
Yes.
support the show.
Yes, Lucy McAllister, of course, the favorite McAllister of the show, has $20 and says, "Viva Bad Bunny." So a nice comment there with a lot of applause. Thank you, Lucy McAllister. Appreciate that. I'll let you read the next one, Wes in Florida.
It's pretty common in entertainment. Think about how many foreign language films get awarded an Oscar. Absolutely. You know, yes. And I know that you may not have had subtitles depending on where you were watching the Super Bowl yesterday. Some networks, some locations, I'm told, they did have subtitles. In other words, they turned on the TV to show the subtitles as it was playing. And some places they didn't have it. But it's not that big a damn deal. It was a good 8 minutes out of your life. And if anything, maybe you got up and did the salsa, the bachata or something, enjoyed it. You know, to call Bad Bunny divisive is to lie about the contents of the show. That's all I can say.
Great show, says Angela Silva with 20. Thank you so much to Wes, to Lucy, to Angela as well. Also, Tony Ladotti comes in with 10, says the next DOJ does not have to keep Maxwell where she is in that comfy facility. That's why Maxwell is desperate for Trump to pardon her while he is still in office.
I'm surprised. I'm just being honest. I'm surprised he hasn't done it yet. Because the longer she stays in prison, the more likely she's going to say something to somebody, which is going to force the issue. Yeah. You know, yeah, they gave her an upgrade as far as facilities, but she wants out. So anything less than that is going to be insufficient. And the only leverage she has is the information she's sitting on. After a certain point, she's going to have to play that card. She's going to have to, or she's just going to languish in prison.
Well, now she's saying that the only way that she'll testify or that she'll speak is if Trump lets her out of jail, which is sending a message, I won't say anything against you if you let me out, right?
That's right. And she has to play that card now.
Yeah.
Right
exactly.
now. Because let's say Pam Bondi gets impeached. Not likely, not probably, but possibly. Then you have a change of leadership and it can go in a completely different direction. You just never know. But you know what? Since we're mentioning Ghislaine Maxwell, since we're talking about the Jeffrey Epstein files as a part of that, I think it's best that we talk to best-selling author, scholar, and journalist Sarah Kendzior. Let's talk to her right now. You know her as the author of The View from Flyover Country, Hiding in Plain Sight, They Knew, and The Last American Road Trip. Sarah, it's so nice to talk to you. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. And sometimes you and I'll make this comparison, we are so immersed in this subject. We sometimes wrongly assume that everyone knows or is aware of the same information that you and I are. The story of Jeffrey Epstein is not new. It dates back decades, but people are only now catching up as far as what happened in Florida, the Acosta federal sweetheart deal and all of that. How would you characterize America's learning curve as it relates to Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, for the last, I guess now almost 7 years, I think America's learning curve has been, pretty good. They have been clamoring for the Epstein documents, for the full story, for what was behind Epstein and Maxwell getting away with it for so long. Epstein was first indicted back in 2007. I don't think nationally people were paying too much attention, but when he, quote unquote, committed suicide in prison, that was a enormous story. And the only reason I think that it died down and that the investigations died down was because of COVID. There was, of course, a top-down attempt to cover everything up by Bill Barr, but I think the public's interest in it was only kind of tempered by the fact that COVID appeared in January of the next year, and that was kind of the only story for a while. We have had Congress and our officials far behind in terms of bringing accountability for what Epstein and Maxwell did. They knew full well what they did. All of this is in the public domain. I've been writing about it for 10 years. They just refused to act on their findings, and that remains true today.
I know that Jeffrey Epstein's brother has said publicly that he does not believe that his brother committed suicide. You yourself said, quote unquote, committed suicide. What do you think is underlining why people are skeptical about how and why he died?
Well, I mean, everything about him has been this giant, well-kept, to some degree, lie. It's been a lie and a facade, unless he's trying to flaunt his criminal impunity, and that's how it was his whole life. And so, for that to continue, along with basic information like the guards suddenly not being there or falling asleep, the cameras miraculously malfunctioning at the exact moment of his death, new information, sort of, about how the death certificate is, one day off the announcement from Trump's first term, from those officials proclaiming that Epstein had died, allegedly came before the actual death of Epstein. I don't know exactly what happened, but I think there are two possibilities. One is that he was murdered. Another is that he was released. Because if they're able to get in there and kill him, they're able to get in there and take him out. And this is one of those things that, if I were to have said this a year ago, I think everyone would be screaming at me that I'm some, wild-eyed conspiracy theorist who shouldn't be trusted. But I think what everybody has had a crash course in with the release of these documents is exactly how far these people will go, both in the disgusting nature of their actions, but also in the unity of the cover-up. The fact that everyone really can keep their mouths shut when it comes to certain things, including mass pedophile, rape, trafficking, and blackmail operations.
You touched upon something that like you almost were reading my mind, because you took my next question. When you say the unity here, this is about powerful people, and powerful people know powerful people. Powerful people protect powerful people, irrespective of their political sign on their forehead. We know in this latest tranche of documents which have come out, we know that there was a level of coziness between Elon Musk and Jeffrey Epstein, far more than what he admitted to, basically what he lied about. We know that there was a coziness between Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Jeffrey Epstein. Peter Attia, the list goes on and on as far as powerful people. My question is, have you been surprised at any point at the unity or the types of powerful people and the lengths that they've gone to make sure that none of this comes to light?
No, I haven't been surprised by that much. I was a little bit surprised by how bluntly they admitted in writing in their own emails, assuming these emails are real, confessing to things like torture, watching, videos of torture at the least, perhaps torturing and killing children, talking about rape, that they were upfront with their crimes, or that they were barely coded. I thought they would make maybe a little more of an effort in that respect. In terms of people staying silent about it, I mean, I've been watching this. Things were in the public domain. I remember the Daily Beast ran a very damning article about a dinner party just chock full of famous pedophiles, people like Woody Allen, and also people that ended up in the Trump administration, like I think Wilbur Ross was there, and a variety of well-known celebrities, along with Epstein and Maxwell. It was at their house. And then there was, comments from other guests about how disgusting this party was, because this was after he had been indicted as a pedophile. This was, I believe, in 2011. So people knew what he was. They weren't naive about any of it. They were just fine with it. Someone like Peggy Siegel, for example, the publicist, she was fine with it. And so in that trove of emails that was released, I'm seeing, firsthand the invites and things like that. It just backs up what was already written about in the public domain. And what I'm more curious about, especially for someone like Howard Lutnick, who literally lived next door to Jeffrey Epstein. Lutnick, of course, became famous for being late to the Twin Towers on 9/11. He ran Cantor Fitzgerald. His employees were killed. He and Epstein lived at 9 and 11 71st Street in New York, side by side for a long time. This was someone who he had financial deals with, real estate deals with. This is someone he knew fairly well. Yet at his confirmation hearing, I don't believe anyone asked any questions about his relationship to Epstein. And it certainly wasn't examined in great detail by the press until this summer when the topic arose again. And again, these are all things that should have come up early, because just having someone in such close proximity to a known pedophile trafficker with espionage ties, that's a national security issue that everyone should naturally be concerned about. But it prompted very, very few questions.
Given everything that you said, and given that everything that is known is in the public domain, and given that I'm a cynic and is not as hopeful and optimistic as other people are about this, I'm of the opinion, and I want to get your assessment of this, I'm of the opinion that there's no amount of documentation which will come out. There's no amount of verification of the tips and accusations which were made in the tip line that are not being followed up, which are going to change the hearts and minds of most Americans. If you want to support Donald Trump, there's nothing which is going to come out in the Epstein files which is going to change your mind or change how this country should react to that. Are you as cynical or despondent about that perceived reality as I am?
Despondent about this entire situation, but in terms of how regular folks react, I'm actually, for once, the less cynical person on the panel. In part because I've written 2 books about Epstein, Hiding in Plain Sight, and They Knew. And I heard many times from people, I wouldn't say they were diehard Trump supporters. They're people who are mostly involved with QAnon. They were interested in the questions that QAnon was raising about, the world being run by billionaire pedophile traffickers, which is correct. They said other things that were wildly incorrect, but that was correct. And some of them read my book. They read Hiding in Plain Sight. They found the documents that I had put in it of Trump's own case, where Trump was accused of raping a 13-year-old girl procured by Epstein in the summer of 1994. They had no idea. This wasn't widely reported in the media during the 2016 election, even though I don't understand why the Democrats wouldn't want to have emphasized it. I mean, it's extraordinarily damning. They truly didn't know. And so they came to the conclusion that everyone is corrupt, which is the same conclusion that I have. So in terms of ordinary people, I do think that access to this kind of information can change their minds. The question is, does that affect in any way what happens to our elections when we already have a aspiring autocrat who has always chosen that route, from Trump's first term onward, who now has control of, the courts, other institutions. He's purged, he's planted people in there, and he's calling for things like nationalized elections. If the country is essentially not completely united, but mostly united against him, does it matter? That's the thing that I worry about. That's one of many, many reasons why I wanted this case addressed so early. And the main reason, of course, is for the benefit of the victims who have had to suffer with this since the 1990s.
You mentioned Trump as an aspiring autocrat, and I think there's a lot of evidence to support that. I saw this very interesting video clip where Pete Buttigieg, former transportation secretary, addressed that question head on. And I would like to get your thoughts on it on the other side. Go ahead, Tony.
I presume you don't think Trump is a good president.
No.
Do you see him as a bad president who's wrong about a lot of things, or as an existential threat to democracy in this country?
I would go well beyond bad president. There are presidents who you disagree with and presidents you agree with. This is, I think, categorically different. We have not had a president, left, right, or center, who has tried to destroy companies, universities, and broadcasters who criticize his government. There's been rough and tumble politics all through U.S. history, but that is not just different, it's different in a way that offends every fiber of American civic values, left, right, and center. We have had disagreements over court rulings, but never had an administration that has been so ready to just say no when a court says you have to do this. That is threatening at a different and much deeper level.
Let's stop it right there. Sarah, what did you make of that? And is Pete Buttigieg hitting the mark?
Well, it sounded very familiar to me, even some of the exact phrasing. There's an article I wrote called "We're Heading into Dark Times" that I published in 2016, where I said almost verbatim the first few lines of what Pete Buttigieg was saying. He then went on to, flesh it out in regards to the courts and things that have actually since happened. I wrote this before Trump was in there, that yes, of course we have had bad presidents, corrupt presidents, political disagreements. We have not had a president whose explicit goal that Trump himself had stated by that point was to destroy the United States of America. Again, I'm a little mystified that it took Buttigieg and others, I guess, 10 years to kind of truly catch up to the threat, especially after an entire term of Trump trying to do that. But, there was also a video in 2014 in February on Fox News, where Trump called in and just confessed all of his plans, that he wanted to crash the economy, that he wanted riots, that would make America great again, that he was in close contact with Vladimir Putin, who he was doing a favor for, and he would be repaid for that favor. I mean, the whole thing was there. And, that was that, along with Bannon's statements and the statements of others in Trump's fold, made what was going to happen very clear. And so obviously the onus was on our institutions to put up some sort of bulwark against that threat. And they didn't. And, this isn't Buttigieg's fault. He wasn't involved really at that time. I'm not even sure he was mayor of South Bend yet. But under the Biden administration, there's a lot of talk about reaching across the aisle. And I was like, why do you want to reach across the aisle? The people want to punch you in the face. Like, do you not understand what's happening here? Like, you are enabling this. Like, when you do things like fund ICE or build cop cities or anything like that, you are creating the infrastructure for Trump's return and making it all much, much easier for him. So he should have been speaking up very forcefully during that time, because that was the best chance of being able to turn this around. And I know he sometimes did, but it was he, and the others in the Biden administration is very inconsistent in tone.
I've always thought that the Democrats as a party recently and longer ago have had a failure of imagination to completely and fully understand the threat of Donald Trump and what he's capable of. This is a guy who doesn't have a sense of humor. He doesn't know how to self-deprecate. He means exactly what he says. Just listen to what he says. He's going to do it. He is going to do everything he can to be successful in whatever he's pursuing. That said, let me be conspiratorial with you, Sarah, for just a moment and see if you buy into this conspiracy theory of mine. And it's just mine. I believe, like or loathe Bill Clinton, there is an opportunity here, given that he and former First Lady, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and their forthcoming testimony on the Epstein files have an opportunity to be the hero in all of this and break this open in a way that only a person with firsthand knowledge could. Let me paint you a scenario. And I know this may be testimony behind closed doors, but it'll come out. If Bill Clinton were to say, hypothetically, yes, I saw X, Y, and Z, and it also include the Donald Trump and Elon Musk who were also there, could he be the person which blows this whole thing up?
Well, that would be very interesting. I mean, I would love to see Bill Clinton talk about all sorts of stuff. I'd love to hear more about what he was doing as the governor of Arkansas while Iran-Contra was happening, and things were being smuggled out of Mena Airport in southern Arkansas. A lot of that's because the Epstein-Maxwell network dates back to Iran-Contra and was actually intimately involved in Iran-Contra through arms traders like Adnan Khashoggi. So Bill Clinton is probably just brimming with insight about all sorts of stuff. I don't know whether he would talk about it in a forthright way. It would be really nice if he did, if that's how he, chose to spend the remaining years of his life. Same with, Hillary Clinton. I do worry that people won't believe him, even if it's damning of himself as well as other people, because, there are fewer people that are as highly politicized in terms of not being taken at their word as the Clintons, whether it's fair or unfair. And the same is true of Donald Trump, although I can't really think of a time where Donald Trump did something in good faith. I think there have been occasions where the Clintons have done things in good faith, but mostly they've done things in terms of their own self-protection. So it would be very interesting if they suddenly turned around and decided, we're just going to let the whole thing out. I mean, I think it's a good idea. I also think it should be open hearings instead of closed. I think that could be beneficial to the public.
Let me ask what you think about this. I think that the sitting president, Donald Trump, is a victim of his own success. And what I mean by that is, prior to him returning to the Oval Office when Joe Biden was president, he was a victim of his own success in the sense that he was promulgating and promoting the idea that Joe Biden was diminished, that he was suffering from cognitive decline and impairment. The success was it worked. The success was the nation paid closer attention to Joe Biden, and we know the rest is history as far as Kamala Harris stepping in. The victim part, and I wonder whether you agree with this, is whether then he put up all our antennae and then look at him through that same lens and question his cognitive impairment and how possibly he set things in motion, which has made it more difficult for him to govern. Would you see any truth in that?
I'm not sure Trump is cognitively impaired aside from just getting older and, maybe a little senile any more than he was in the first term. I think he's probably a sociopath. And I think a lot of people mistake that, the sadism, the cruelty, the bluntness, the complete disregard for rule of law as some sort of, mental ailment, like when he would sleep during his trial, when he was on trial for felonies, and people thought, oh, this is a doddering old sleepy man. And I was like, no, he's flaunting that he knows the outcome, that it won't make a difference, that he won't face consequences, so he could just take a nap because it really doesn't matter. And that's how he is a lot of the time when he's doing grotesque and horrible things. With Biden, I do think, if the debate is to be taken, as it seemed, there was some cognitive impairment, enough for him to step down, something he should have done earlier, to allow Harris to run for a longer period of time. But, with Trump, he reminds me of all those mobsters who would walk around in their bathrobes, or, when Paul Manafort showed up in a wheelchair all of a sudden, and they're like, oh, I'm so infirm, and then they're fine. They're, as soon as they're out of trouble, magically, whatever terrible ailment has possessed them is gone, and they're back to criming. And so I kind of think Trump is like that, although I do think just age as a factor, he's almost 80. He is not in his prime. And that's why it's always important to look at the successors, who's coming up, and where all that money that Trump is taking is going. That's still one of the main questions that I have.
Before I let you go, Sarah, I have loved this conversation because not only are you a walking history lesson, going back to all, even Iran-Contra, and connecting that to Clinton's legacy as governor, but you could talk about the contemporary issues. And so, and I know it's an unfair question. I'm going to tell you this in advance. It's an unfair question. We've long heard about this being a moment of constitutional crisis. Many things that the Trump administration is trying to do, and I say Trump administration, not just the person and President Donald Trump, but the fullness of the administration. A lot has been made of this being a constitutional crisis moment. If you were to sum up what may lie ahead for America, at worst, what does that look like to you from where you sit, as far as not identifying the threat early enough, as you have mentioned with Pete Buttigieg and others? Or at best, what could we look forward to? What are the extremes on this timeline?
Well, to be blunt, what I've been worried about the entire time is that their goal is to emulate the fall of the Soviet Union, partition the U.S. into a number of oligarch fiefdoms, have them war for each other for resources, especially in light of climate change that are hard to find, and kind of depopulate the country and replace a lot of people with artificial intelligence, all of which is a worst case scenario disaster. I lay this out in greater detail in my book, They Knew. I know it's probably very jarring to get it as a summary, but you asked. The best case scenario, this is why I'm very, very against all these, little secessionist movements. Sometimes people are like, the red states, and it's like, gee, who lives in the red states? Whose fate are you leaving up in the air? It's the states with the most Black people. It's the states with the most Native American reservations. It's the state where I live in Missouri, and I sure as hell didn't vote for this. So I don't think it's fair to, punish everyone. We're stronger when we're a nation together. And I think Minneapolis has been a wonderful example of that. Minnesota as a state has been a great example of that. other states, people from all over the country backing them in their fight to get ICE out of their city. That's a great example. So that's the kind of behavior to emulate. And if we do that, if we're that strong, then I think that we at least have a chance as Americans and aspiring Americans, which is what I would call, migrants trying hard to get the citizenship to which, I think they are entitled. Then I think we could get to a better place. That combined with just brutal honesty about all of the corruption and just the the systemic sins of this country that led to the modern day corruption that we faced. If we're honest, if we're brave, I do think that we still have a chance despite all this.
Best-selling author, scholar, and journalist Sarah Kendzior. You know her work from The View from Flyover Country, Hiding in Plain Sight, They Knew, and The Last American Road Trip. You can find her books and more at sarahkendzior.com. That's SarahKendzior.com. Sarah, this is our first conversation. I sure hope it's not the last one.
Yeah,
I thoroughly enjoyed it. And let's make sure we do it again sometime, somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Appreciate you, Sarah. Well, that was a wonderful conversation. And Kim, if you want to bring me back anytime, just make sure Sarah's part of it.
Yeah,
I
she's
absolutely love that.
truly amazing. I'm putting her Substack address in the chat right now. As someone just noted, go please take a look at her Substack. I can't explain to you how poetic her writing is, and then you learn things about history and politics all at the same time. Please look at her Substack. It is at Sarah Kendzior. If you go to Substack, you can check it out. But I also just posted that in the chat. So I know her conversations with her are just eye-opening and riveting every single time. We got this from Depressed Canadian, and thanks for the 20, Depressed Canadian, who says Dems talk about holding the Trump administration accountable. But what we need to remember, writes Depressed Canadian, is their record. The Obama administration did not prosecute any of the Bush administration for torture, and the Biden administration slow-walked the key prosecutions for the Trump's first term. So are they all out to protect each other, Mo?
I think it's a combination of things. The Democratic Party, and this is what I think one of the failures of the party is, there is this belief that if they just act normal or they try to keep it, in other words, there's a difference between peace and quiet. The Democrats wanted quiet. We were not in a period of peace. The correct response was going to agitate people, and they did not choose that. They should have immediately prosecuted Donald Trump for the events of January 6th and the classified documents. Now, I don't know if that's more a decision of Merrick Garland. I don't know if that was a wish that was passed down from the Biden administration. I don't know who specifically to blame, but I knew after a year into the Biden administration, when there had been no real movement on anything that Donald Trump and the previous administration had done, that it was never going to get anywhere in time. And that said to me, the Democrats were all about peace and quiet more than anything. They didn't want to go to war, so they just wanted to have peace and quiet. And that did not do anyone any good, big picture.
Another super chat from CC Ryder with 15, and thank you, CC, who says the GOP has not hidden motivations to convert USA into the Hungary model. Orban was a keynote speaker at CPAC in 2022, she writes. Tucker C. hosted from Hungary. Heritage Foundation praised Hungary as a model for conservatism. But you know what's interesting about that, Mo? People either look away or they're not paying attention, or it kind of just flies right under the radar and people don't pick it out and go, look what they're doing.
Part of it is probably because people are loath to make comparisons to the worst of the world. We don't want to talk about this in terms of fascism or Nazism. We don't want to talk about it in terms of dictatorship because that's hyperbole. No, it's not. No, it's not. And I understand that in our political discourse, we can be prone to hyperbole. But this is not that time. And I keep trying to tell people, when you see the president cracking down on media, trying to shut people up, when they're disappearing people from the streets as far as immigration enforcement, we are in a de facto burgeoning dictatorship.
Yeah.
And that is the correct word. And when you talk about it in the terms of a dictatorship, where he's making moves with no respect to Congress, with no respect to the Constitution, then you have to call a thing a thing. You have to tell people exactly what it is. It's not hyperbole. And since the Democrats have been loath to do that, they bought into this idea of we need to tone down the rhetoric. Yeah, you can do that, but you can still tell the truth. You don't have to use violent imagery or violent rhetoric. You can still call a thing. And this president is acting in a dictatorial fashion. That is a fair statement. When he says that he wants to wholesale change the elections for the benefit of the Republican Party and against the words of the Constitution, that constitutes fascism. That constitutes a dictatorship. When he wants to make these unilateral decisions to strike Venezuela in Venezuela, that constitutes a dictatorship. Call a thing a thing. Call it what it is. And the Democrats are loath to do that. And I say that because they were loath to prosecute him, because they were loath to say what it is in the moment, we've gone further down this road than we needed to. And it makes it even more difficult to get back because you've let the monster grow because you don't want to call it a monster. You're afraid of people's sensibility.
When is it enough? I mean, when do Americans see the Constitution being trampled? Is it the suggestion of nationalizing the vote or having Republicans be responsible for the vote? Is that when Americans' eyes will be opened and finally will go, okay, bridge too far. Now we see what they're doing. How stupid do we have to be to not realize that everything we hold dear is at risk right now?
I firmly believe sometimes you have to hit rock bottom. You have to lose something substantial, something very personal, before people understand a change has to be made or that we can never come back this way again. And since we keep collectively as a nation downplaying this moment, downplaying the threat of Donald Trump to the Constitution and the way of life as we know it in America, we are further delaying that moment, almost in a way where someone who's an addict or a victim of substance abuse is in denial about their condition. And it takes even longer for that intervention to happen and for it to stick. I am of the opinion that something major, undeniable, unforgettable, and damaging to America has to happen before we wake up. I don't want that to happen, but if the past is prologue, that is what is going to have to happen for people to realize that we need to save our country. And that, for me, is not a political or partisan statement. That's about survival. Yeah. It's about preserving this country and the idea, people want to call themselves patriots, but they don't want to save the country. They don't want to realize that our country is in danger. And MAGA is fine with it because as far as they're concerned, it doesn't hurt them. They haven't made the connection as far as what the economic policies are doing to red states. They haven't figured that out yet. When they do, there will be a change which will be made. We who are not in MAGA understand it because we see how people are being mistreated and killed in Minnesota. We see it. We are suffering the effects of it. So we're more readily available to step in and ask for a change. But not all of America is there yet. And I don't want to publicly theorize what needs to happen, but we're going to have to hit bottom for all this to end, or MAGA will continue to survive in some other form. Because let's be honest, Donald Trump, and this is where I disagree with Sarah Kendzior about her assessment of Trump, his physical and cognitive state. I don't believe this president is going to be here this time next year. I believe natural causes is coming for him. And if you look at the swollen ankles, which has to do with probably congestive heart failure, kidney failure, and all sorts of other maladies that we're not privy to, I don't think he's going to be here in a year. And I'm not wishing death on anyone. I'm saying that I've seen the progression in my father. I know how this story is going to end. I can't tell you exactly when it's going to end, but we're closer to the end of the book than we are the beginning of the book.
Nearly a decade ago, and I know you mentioned this earlier, but this is I think another huge revelation from the Epstein files, that in 2017, Epstein was noting in emails that Donald Trump was showing signs of dementia at a dinner. He wrote this: "Some at a dinner with Donald last night were concerned about dementia. He wore tons of makeup, didn't recognize old friends. He was reportedly not doing too well, and there were concerns. There were also concerns in the White House when Steve Bannon stepped away. Apparently there was this talk of Trump not doing too well, showing signs of dementia back then. Now, nearly 10 years later, it seems even worse, but it seems like people aren't really paying attention to that."
It is worse. Let's say it is worse. The behavior is worse. The outbursts are worse. Yes, he has more enablers around him, but the individual's behavior is worse. And our reluctance to point that out is going to be our undoing. How we try to sanitize it, how we try to stain wash the things that he says. If it were done by any other person, we would say this person needs to have a cognitive exam by an impartial doctor who's not trying to preserve someone's political career. I understand we'll never get the full truth about a sitting president's health, because that's a national security issue. If he has a peanut allergy, we'll never know about it. If he had a stroke, we damn sure will never know about it. Or a TIA, or if he had some sort of heart failure, congestive heart failure, we're not going to know about that. I understand that. But when we're dealing with a compulsive liar about everything, then it calls into question everything and the extent of the lies. We may not know the exact condition of his health, but we know it's not what they're telling us as far as he's healthier than even President Obama, or he's the most healthy president ever. GTFOH with all that BS. Okay. No. So that's what concerns me, is because the lying with impunity will have an adverse effect on the rest of us.
Well, you hear it because you hear him say something outrageous. 2 days later, he's like, "Did I say that? I never said
You
that."
have to remember. Yeah.
Does not remember it. And here's what I was looking for. Before leaving his position as the White House chief strategist in August of 2017, okay, so 9 years ago, former Trump associate Steve Bannon allegedly believed the president had early stage dementia. That's according to a former producer from 60 Minutes. So this has been going on for a long time. And here's the question, Mo. If the president is in a bad way cognitively, who's running the country? Whose policies are being pushed? Is it Stephen Miller? And
Yes.
so should we look at it and go, Stephen Miller's really the president of America? Is that what we want? Or am I going down a road too far?
And I touched upon this with Sarah Kendzior as far as being a victim of your own success. Every accusation is a confession. What do we hear during the Biden administration? They're saying like, well, we don't know where Biden is. Who is running the country? Who's making these decisions? What about the auto pen?
Yeah.
It's actually more relevant now. The question is actually more essential to understanding where our government is. If you have to wonder, like, well, he doesn't remember what he did 2 minutes ago. And we all have a printed out record of everything that he said. There's video, there's audio, their text, their posts on True Social. There's not a question of, did we remember that correctly? He's the one who would sit up there and say, hey, I want to give you $2,000 checks for this, that, and the other. And then he denies, I never said that.
Yeah.
It's like, mother, father, yes, you did. We heard it. We're old enough to remember. So yes, that is all relevant. And to answer your question, there's probably a very small circle of Stephen Miller, Dan Scavino, and some others who are probably making decisions either without the knowledge of the president or presenting information in a way which manipulates him to making a decision which forwards their particular agenda. I believe everything immigration related to Stephen Miller, point blank. everything. What ICE is doing, any type of legislation they're trying to get passed, the marketing and messaging, that's all Stephen Miller.
Mhm.
Now, is it presented in a way where they'll get the okay from Trump? Sure. But I believe he's the guiding force because it's an extension of Stephen Miller's personality. It's like everything seems like it's coming directly out of his mouth.
And the rest of the Project 2025 guys. And it seems like the only thing Trump cares about, he'll do whatever as long as he can scoop up the money and put it into his own account, scoop up that Bitcoin, scoop up that crypto, get all those Trump Tower deals in. So as long as his family is coming out, rosy in the end financially, whatever, he'll just do whatever they say.
But speaking of mouths,
yes.
Talk about Zelman's minty mouth.
Nice. Yes. The Zellman's Minty Mouth. It is, I don't know if you've tried this, but this is really good. So you pop a couple in your mouth and it tastes really minty and fresh. And then after you get that taste in your mouth, you just swallow them. They're really small. You just swallow them. And they have this oil, parsley seed oil, sunflower seed oil, and some magic happens where they combine in your digestive system and neutralize any odors that are coming back up. And so fresh breath is your friend, and you get the fresh breath for Valentine's Day and any day. So if you're going to be close to people, or maybe you're just worried about not having fresh breath, you just pop a few of these, couple of these at a time, and you don't have to worry about having some nasty breath because Zellman's takes care of it. So it's really a confidence builder. It is Zellmans.com, Zellmans.com. And we've got a great deal on the Mark Thompson Show. You get off your first order 15% off with our code. It is MarkT at Zellmans.com. They have the spearmint flavor. They have the peppermint flavor. Peppermint, I kind of like it. It's got a strong mint taste. The spearmint is a little bit sweeter. But the container is really small and compact, but try it out. It's Zellmans.com and use the code MarkT for your 15% off and have some fresh breath.
I guess one thing is going to lead into the other.
Yeah.
Before we were talking about Donald Trump, his memory or lack thereof, his contradiction of things that he had previously said, Donald Trump would have been a perfect, and I mean this literally, a perfect politician in a pre-internet era where he would be able to say what he would want in any given situation, and there would be relatively no consequence because there would be no internet. It's not like we can look it up on YouTube. We would not have this expansive media landscape of podcasts and YouTube or other broadcast outlets and cable outlets, which could play a clip ad infinitum. You would just have the 5, 6, and 11 o'clock news at best, maybe the McLaughlin group on the weekend, but you would not have this inundation of clips where you could see and remember, because we can't remember all the lies that this man has told, what Donald Trump said, let's say in 2016 versus what he's saying right now. Here's a perfect example of what Donald Trump said then and what he's saying now, as in when he was running for president the first time versus being president the second time. And notice that they are in direct opposition and contradiction with one another, but his supporters do not care. Watch this.
Saudi Arabia giving $25 million, Qatar, all of these countries. These are people that kill women and treat women horribly, and yet you take their money.
Not a gift to me, it's a gift to the Department of Defense, and you should know better.
Why don't you give back the money that you've taken from certain countries that treat certain groups of people so horribly?
You should be embarrassed asking that question. They're giving us a free jet. I could say, no, don't give us, I want to pay you $1 billion or 400 million or whatever it is. Or I could say, thank you very much.
Why don't you give back the money? I think it would be a great gesture.
I thought it was a beautiful gesture. Now, there are those that say we shouldn't be accepting gifts to the Defense Department.
And I would say only a stupid person would say that.
It should have never happened. And I think you owe an explanation to the American people.
We're giving to everybody else. Why wouldn't I accept the gift?
If I ever said that, that's quid pro quo.
I mean, there you have it. He wasn't directly answering himself, but he might as well have been, because everything in that clip where he had spoken on and took a decided viewpoint, he had exactly contradicted 9 years later without consequence.
Hypocrisy, absolute hypocrisy.
That would have been perfect, let's say in 1988. He could say those things and we wouldn't have had the record to be able to rebut them. But now we can. Now we do. Now we can see either he's a nihilist and believes in nothing, or he believed in something prior to being president. And now, since it's no longer suiting for him, he's now taking the other side. And we want to talk about one of the biggest flip-floppers of all time. It is actually Donald Trump. Is that indicative of cognitive decline? I don't know. Is that indicative of just inherent dishonesty? Probably. I think there's probably some combination where he doesn't remember what he said about this, that, or the other 2 weeks ago, much less 9 years ago.
Yeah. And I wonder, and I think it kind of came to the forefront a few days ago with this horrible post that Trump made about the Obamas that was blamed on a staffer, is that he now, I think with that admission that a staffer did it, is he really typing things up? Is he, who's the messaging really from? You know, in the olden days, you kind of, at least you thought you knew that it was the president talking. You thought it was the leader of the country that was saying these things, that was writing these things. And now you've got Truth Social or X or whatever it is. And what staffer, what intern, and is there a script? Are they doing it on purpose? What's behind all of this? Don't you wonder? I mean, are they writing all these all caps weird things for him to make him look crazy, to kind of rally up the MAGA crowd and then distract from other things? Or what's the point? What's the purpose?
I think there's a combination of things. Yes, he's posting, and yes, other people are posting in his name. As far as the Obama video or portion of that video is concerned, I always say a person of innocent mind acts accordingly. And if we take the White House at their word, and I'm not saying that, but if we did, and that a staffer was responsible for that video, what is the response of a person of innocent mind? I do not condone that video. I condemn that video. I would never disrespect a former president like that. We're going to immediately take it down. And I apologize to the Obamas, because that is not indicative of who I am or this administration. He did none of that. The video stayed up for 12 hours. When asked about it, he denied it and did not apologize for it, which says to me, even if he didn't physically repost that on Truth Social, he agrees with it. So as far as I'm concerned, the buck does not stop with him. And he is endorsing that and is angered by the fact that he was told to take it down, or it was taken down. So for me, whether it was a low-level staffer or someone like Dan Scavino, who's the head of all of his media, or whether it was Donald Trump himself, is neither here nor there, because Donald Trump, the president of the United States and leader of the free world, takes responsibility for nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Never apologize, right? Never admit that you're the one that in the wrong. Sausalito Vicky says, why isn't Bush speaking up? In fact, why haven't all the presidents stood up in a better way? And it's interesting because the only president that I see standing up is Obama, which is probably why Trump keeps attacking Obama. But why aren't all the presidents standing up? At least you would think they love America, right? They love the Constitution. These are people that have served. So why aren't they all standing up in unison saying, we got a problem?
They're a combination of things. And I know a lot of people, I mean, a lot in the Bush administration who work with him. And they tell me that George Bush as a person is very much about the business of not criticizing a sitting president. You don't criticize your successors. And that and I'll take them at their word in that regard. And he's been pretty consistent. He hasn't endorsed anyone, hasn't said much about anything or anyone, even when Obama was president. So he has been consistent in that regard. But these are special times requiring special measures, and you need people to speak out. Part of it, I believe, is political, where the Bush family is still firmly centered in Republican politics and does not want the slings and arrows coming their way like Jeb Bush received when he was running for president, and in the way that Liz Cheney received while she was supporting Kamala Harris. The Bush family has largely removed itself from the public discourse regarding Donald Trump and others. Me, personally, I would want them to speak out. I would want people like Condoleezza Rice to speak out. If Colin Powell were alive, he would have been speaking out. There are still Bush-era cabinet members who should have been speaking out, like Dick Cheney did. For whatever reason, they are not, and that's disappointing to me. But there's only so much a Joe Biden can do, a Barack Obama can do. Barack Obama did what he was supposed to do during the election. He was saying, don't boo, vote. Get out there and vote. There's not a lot that he can do now after the fact. Yes, he can give voice to some of us who are voiceless. But other than having some speeches and some rallies and some PSAs, there's nothing he can do. And there's been a lot of criticism of Kamala Harris saying, why isn't she out there, more out there? She's a private citizen. You had your chance November 4th of 2024, and we didn't meet the moment. Now expecting her to do something and intervene and swoop in is denial of reality and shifting of blame.
How about we do a little bit of news, and then I would love to hear your thoughts on the Melania movie. Can we do that?
Do you really want to hear?
Oh, I do. I really want to hear it.
Do that.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Let's do some news.
Woohoo! On the Mark Thompson Show with Mo Kelly sitting in today, I'm Kim McAllister, and this report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Senator Adam Schiff is taking aim at President Trump's recent push to nationalize elections. During his appearance on ABC's This Week, the Democrat from California said the president is doing anything he can to suppress the vote. His comments come after Trump told reporters in the Oval Office earlier this week that if states can't run elections fairly, then the federal government should get involved. Trump also said some states run their elections horribly, and he made renewed claims of past election fraud. Again, Senator Adam Schiff now saying this is a huge, huge problem. Unredacted copies of the more than 3 million files related to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein are available now to members of Congress. Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin said he had viewed some of the unredacted documents and described some of the redactions as baffling. Lawmakers will have to view the files linked to the late sex criminal at the Justice Department during business hours. That is how they are doing it. Democratic lawmakers are calling on Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick to resign over his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. He has previously shared that he distanced himself from the convicted sex offender after an encounter in 2005. But documents tell a different story, revealing Lutnick and Epstein invested in a private company, intelligence company, together in 2013. An email correspondence suggests he visited the millionaire's private island with his family the year prior. So maybe he didn't distance himself as much as he's trying to say. Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney says she is prepared to speak fully and honestly, in quotes, if granted clemency by President Trump. Maxwell pleading the fifth during her virtual deposition before the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee today. Committee Chairman James Comer calling the decision by Maxwell to invoke her right against self-incrimination disappointing. Maxwell is the former girlfriend and longtime associate of Jeffrey Epstein, now serving a 20-year federal sentence for her role in recruiting and trafficking victims for Epstein. She has completed less than 4 years of that term and now is doing it in a farm-like setting, which is much more pleasant than, the major lockdown that she had been in. Question, what in percentages, what do you think the chances are of Ghislaine Maxwell getting out of prison here pretty soon before the end of Trump's term?
I said earlier in the show, I'm surprised he hasn't done it as of yet. I think they're high, and Trump has shown no aversion to pardoning controversial figures. People have said that that would be the end of his presidency if he did it. Now, they had a full-on insurrection on January 6th, and it didn't lead anywhere. I believe he's going to pardon her, and it'll be sooner than later.
The search for the missing mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie remains ongoing in southern Arizona. Over the weekend, Savannah Guthrie and her siblings posted a video saying they would pay for the return of their mother, Nancy. The TV station in Tucson, KGUN 9, reported ransom notes sent to news outlets demanded $6 million in Bitcoin with a deadline set for later today. Officials at the Winter Olympics are investigating several reports of broken medals now. Team USA athletes Breezy Johnson and Alyssa Liu both shared the pieces connecting their gold medals to their ribbons snapped right off. Liu posting a picture of her holding up her broken medal saying, "My medal don't need the ribbon." So apparently they're not constructed very well. And as we mentioned at the top of the show, Bad Bunny's Super Bowl halftime performance featured a real wedding in the middle of the show. Bad Bunny was performing Baile Inolvidable? I don't know how to say it. Inolvidable. When he led the crowd to a wedding where special guest Lady Gaga was the wedding singer. Representatives for Bad Bunny confirmed it was real, saying the couple invited him to their wedding with them being invited out to be a part of the show in return.
That's a hell of a wedding story.
That is all forever. They'll be able to say, we got married not at the Super Bowl, but in the Super Bowl, right? Absolutely. This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Mo, if you haven't tried Coachella Valley coffee, I'm telling you, you are missing out. Mark loves all the coffee. It's the best coffee, he says, that it's ever passed through his lips. I love the tea.
They sent me. He sent me some Coachella Valley coffee. I am on board. Yeah.
You should be on board. The teas are amazing. If you have tea drinkers at your house, I can't even tell you. Please try it. Do yourself a favor. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com really is the best product, and they are the kindest people. And sometimes they send you a little extras. I love it. You can get 10% off with our super secret code, which isn't really super secret, Mark T, and that'll save you 10% off. The coffees are truly amazing. The company has wonderful ethics. The people are so kind, and the product is just absolutely off the charts good. So check it out, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I gotta say I'm partial to the vanilla tea. Was there a product that they sent you that you were like, oh, I gotta order more of that?
I got to talk to my wife because it's downstairs. She was making, because she's the coffee drinker. So she makes it to me. I think it was a vanilla. I think.
Oh, the vanilla. That's the tea. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So good. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Okay. So before we get out of here, per Kim's request, talk about this Melania documentary. And let me just say this. I'm not going to talk about it from a content perspective because I'm not going to watch it. I'm just not. It's not about what it contains. It's about how it's being positioned, marketed, and sold. I worked in the music industry for the better part of 15 years. And I worked for record labels, major record labels like Warner Brothers, Virgin Records, back when Richard Branson owned it. Capitol Records, Interscope Records. I worked on the first Eminem album and a lot of other artists. And I mentioned that not to name drop, just to tell you how the business worked even back then. It was not uncommon that the record labels, especially if you had a project which was of struggling notoriety, it was not uncommon for us to go out and just buy the product to make sure that it landed higher on the SoundScan lists and the Billboard charts. That was done because if you had a good first week, it was more likely to be added to radio station playlists. It was more likely to get positive press coverage. You were more likely to get more interviews from major outlets for the artist. You know, oh, it's the #1 album in the country. Yada, 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 Eminem's. All that works together. And the record companies, and I know this because I facilitated the payments. Here's how the scheme worked. So I'm talking first-hand knowledge. We would pay across the different artists, hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars to different record pools. Record pools were the DJs, the coalition of DJs in various parts of the country who would get our music, take it to clubs, play it on the radio in the DJ mix section, and so forth, and get a story going. When you first usually hear a record, you would hear it maybe late at night or something over the weekend, and it would start to grow from there. That's because we were greasing DJs to play the music. That's because we were giving them money to go to places like Warehouse, Sam Goody, Tower Records, Amoeba Records, whatever, to buy out all the product to make it seem like it was hotter than it actually was. So we get a better chart position on Billboard. So we get more radio airplay. What does this have to do with Melania? I'll tell you what has to do with Melania. There's a lot of evidence to support, and I know the Daily Beast has an extensive report on this, that there was not an organic support of this documentary, Melania, that Republican groups were buying out theaters en masse, buying out the whole theater and giving away the tickets. This is not hard to decipher because just in ticket tracking, you can figure out whether it was one entity which bought 300 seats in a given showing of Melania. That's what it's turned out to be. But it was done, as you can see, to generate positive press. So they can say it was the #1 documentary released in the past 10 years to come out on a Thursday featuring a former immigrant, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. That's done in movies all the time. And I think it's not just this documentary. It's done with a lot of other movies. If you were to ask me about Avatar, I would say the same thing's being done with that. How it made $2 billion and nobody saw it twice, I have no idea other than that. But I say all that to say there is considerable evidence, not conjecture, evidence that the support for this Melania documentary is purely in political circles. And you talk about paid protesters, quote unquote. No, this is paid support of this documentary to make it seem more successful than it is. And there's one other thing, and I know I'm over, but this is very important. Also in the music industry, here's a parallel. There are a number of major record labels, rap moguls, and I'm not going to mention them by name because the danger is real, who started in the business first as
my apologies.
That's okay. It's going off on my phone too.
Emergency alert. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of rap moguls started their business in the drug trade. And what they would do to launder their money is they would start a music label, create product, sell it out of their trunk or whatever, maybe get in business with a local record store, and then tell people working for them and they would give them money, drug money, to go buy their own music product. Long story short is that's money laundering to clean the money. I say that to say, when you read that they spent some $75 million on this Melania documentary, don't take that as people losing money. Take that as people paying money from one entity to another. And just because $75 million was spent, it doesn't mean that people lost 75 million. No, someone got paid 75 million. A lot of this can be a tax write-off, but people were paid. It was not uncommon. I don't know if you know this, Kim. Remember when they had the music videos and they spent like $1 million on a music video?
Yeah.
A lot of that was done as a kickback where you would spend that $1 million, but it's a recoupable cost. So the record company would pay out that $1 million. The director of the music video would get a private cut, like say maybe $100,000 or $200,000. The executive who set up and chose that music director got like $100,000, $200,000. The artist was billed the full $1 million because of recoupable costs. And so the record executive makes money. The music director makes money. The record label makes all that money back. And the only person who lost was the artist. My point is $75 million changed hands, but people were getting paid. So don't think that because they spent $75 million, it's a loss. No, money was changing hands in a very strategic way.
There's a story that came out of Oregon that would support your thinking there. Amazon pulled Melania from an Oregon movie out of after the owner's criticism about fake ticket sales. The owner of this local cinema in Oregon says Amazon is upset at the way they marketed the movie, as some in the United States say healthy ticket sales are not reflected by all of the empty seats. No.
And there you have it. I mean, it's not hard to follow the money here and realize, yeah, the theater is sold out, but nobody's in it.
Nobody's home. Did you also see the story, speaking of Melania, that members of the U.S. military are being pressured to see Melania? Apparently the troops are supposed to take their families to go see this movie. And if they don't, I don't know if there's some repercussion or what, but people with the Military Religious Freedom Foundation say members of the U.S. military are feeling very pressured to go see this documentary, Melania.
Imagine if Barack Obama had the dirty nerve and the unmitigated gall to have American servicemen and women go see the Becoming documentary talking about Michelle Obama. Just imagine how that would have been received. Take the politics out of it. Just look at the president or a presidential administration trying to propagandize the military for political purposes.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Guess what, Mo?
I think it's time. Let's shout out.
Made it to the end yet again. Yeah.
What's coming up for tomorrow?
Oh, we have a lot coming up for tomorrow. First, though, I want to say thank you to Luis, who pops in with 5, says, well said, Mo. I can call a shark a goldfish and treat it as such, but I do so at my peril, for it will kill me no matter what I call it. Hashtag call things what they are. Absolutely. Thank you so much for the contributions. Everyone who contributed today, find us at themarkthompsonshow.com, PayPal, Patreon, click-throughs. Please click like, subscribe if you haven't. Tomorrow, David K. Johnston will be on The Mark Thompson Show. Mark returns. Tech Tuesday with Jefferson Graham. It's all happening right here on The Mark Thompson Show.
Bye-bye.
That's it. Bye-bye.